is the 7th annual day, and as you are all well aware, because of the exceptional circumstances related to the pandemic and the restrictions on gatherings and travel, we are, for the first time on my memory, holding this event virtually, and with all of its drawbacks compared to an actual face-to-face event where you'd be right about now or right before the event enjoying a reception and having the opportunity to mingle with people and hug each other. And in the 4 years that I've been organizing these events, it has always had a very emotional and very warm kind of air in the room, which of course we cannot have in this virtual environment. However, it does have its positive aspects as well in terms of accessibility and our ability to open the event to everybody and all the people around the country. And I'm extremely happy to see so many of you gather here tonight. As a forensic psychologist and a criminal justice professor, I teach and talk about the issue of wrongful convictions, and recently I'm also involved in research on some aspects of it, and so I talk about it all the time. But this year, especially, we are finding ourselves as a community, as a society, we're finding ourselves in the midst of social and political turmoil, with justice reforms and law enforcement reforms being debated in every significant platform. And so it is especially important to raise our voices in making sure that the excruciating injustice of wrongful convictions be at the forefront of those agendas. It is time to demand justice for the innocent and take the responsibility to make the change happen in the system in order to not only make sure that the currently wrongfully convicted people are released and are cared for and reintegrated, but also, and most importantly, that we fight for systemic change to prevent future wrongful convictions. Now we have an amazing lineup of speakers and special guests for you tonight, and I hope that we will, you guys will learn a lot and leave today with a little flame in your mind about how you can help and how you will pass it on and make your contribution to raising awareness about this. So before I introduce our first speaker, I just wanted to quickly note that we will hold off questions until the end, and I am asking that if you have a question, please type it up in the chat, and I will look through those and I will read them at the end so that we avoid any kinds of technical glitches or people not being sure on how to turn things on. Okay. So let me just quickly check. Do we have Bill? Okay.
No, Bill is going to come in. He'll check in later. Let's move to the next part of the program.
So, so this year's event is titled "When Wrongful Conviction is Visits Law Enforcement," and most of the time when we talk about law enforcement in the context of wrongful convictions, we talk about misconduct or errors that led to the conviction. However, today you will also hear stories of officers who ended up on the other side of it, and it is just once again underscoring that nobody is immune. It could really happen to anyone, to start off, it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic, whom I've been partnering with to organize these events over the years, and whose foundation is yet again, of course, co-sponsoring this event this year. Jeffrey Deskovic is an internationally recognized wrongful conviction expert and the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice that has currently up to date freed 7 wrongfully convicted people and passed 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. Jeff is an advisory board member of the coalition group It Could Happen to You that passed the country's first Commission on Prosecutory Conduct, and we hear a little bit more about that today as well. He also serves on the Global Advisory Council and is a member of Restorative Justice International. Jeff's body of work includes delivering over 200 presentations across the country and internationally, authoring more than 200 articles, participating in countless television, radio, print media, news media shows and interviews, lobbying elected officials and testifying at legislative hearings. Jeff has also been relentless at educating incoming law enforcement and legal professionals on wrongful convictions in colleges, in police training academy, and in law school. Jeff himself has a bachelor degree in behavioral science from Mercy College, which also gave him a scholarship. He received a master's degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and his thesis was on the causes of wrongful convictions and the changes needed to address them. And just very recently, May of last year, Jeff obtained a law degree from the Elizabeth Howe School of Law at Pace University in pursuit of his dream of exonerating others as an attorney. He's currently pending admission to the bar. Jeff is a producer also of several documentaries and shows on the topic, and a co-owner of the Recharge Beyond the Bar's re-entry game, which assists formerly incarcerated people with reconnecting with their families and friends. Jeff has, in recognition of his advocacy work, he's received numerous awards, some of which include the Public Sector Servant of Justice Award from the It Could Happen to You Coalition, the 2018 Distinguished Alum Award from John Jay College, the Sobri Pasternak Award, which is given to the law student who contributed the most to civil rights while being a student, the Humanitarian of the Year Award by New Rochelle Chamber of Commerce, the New Yorker of the Week Award by the television station New York One, the Conquest Award, the Agent of Change Award, and the list just goes on and on. Jeff's motivation for doing all of this work is in that he was himself wrongfully convicted of murder and rape and served 16 years in prison from the age 17 to 32. Jeff's wrongful conviction, which happened despite a negative DNA test, was based upon a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, and an inept public defender. He lost 7 appeals and was turned down for parole before being exonerated by further DNA testing via the DNA data bank that identified the actual perpetrator. His life is dedicated to fighting wrongful conviction and working for the criminal justice system and reform. Please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everybody. Tremendous turnout. Thank you very much. So, as is our tradition on Wrongful Conviction Day, it is in recognition of wrongful conviction. It's not only about the ongoing struggle. It's not only about, although it does involve that, it's not only about the people that have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated. It is equally about the people who are still fighting for their freedom right now. And so I want to go to our first slide. And we're going to start out. We'll go over people who have recognized innocence claims. We're going to go over them, and then we're going to introduce the people who have made it out, and we will then move on to our program. So I'd like to get the next slide. No. Yes. Okay. So our first slide is Andrew Krivak. He's been wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years. His co-defendant Anthony Pippo. DePippo is listed in the National Registry of Exonerations. He's been compensated. He's been home for 3 years. Yet Andy's co-defendant, who he's alleged to have done the crime with, has remained in prison for an additional 3 years. We start out with him. He is a Deskovic Foundation client. We screened the case. We brought in attorneys who filed the post-conviction motion, which was based on evidence showing that a serial rapist, Howard Gombert, whose MO matched that of the victim, that of the crime, that it matched him, basically, right? And there's a bunch of evidence that way. And also that the same polygraphist that coerced the false confession out of Andy did the same thing to me, and I was able to win a civil judgment. Somebody please mute yourself. Somebody please mute yourself. Hello. So the post-conviction motion was denied. An appeal was won on the issue that he should have gotten a hearing to present that evidence. Then we got the hearing. The evidence was put on. The conviction was overturned. And the foundation at that point brought in attorneys, Oscar Michelin, Karen Nieworth also joined the team to handle the appeal. An appeal was won 2 days ago. An appeal was won. And I'd like to go to one of the lawyers right now, Oscar Michelin, who's with us. He'll add something. Andy is still incarcerated despite winning. We're awaiting a decision by Putnam County DA Tendy to make a decision. Is he going to appeal the reversal? Will he retry the case? Or will he finally do the right thing and dismiss it? So at this point, I'd like Oscar Michelin to make a couple of quick remarks.
Just quick, hello, everybody. I know a lot of you, some in person, some on Facebook. And I'm Raina, good to see you again. Yeah, we were very elated that the appellate division in a 4-0 decision agreed that Andy's conviction had to be vacated. And, it's very sad because behind Jeff, I see Andy's co-defendant, Anthony DePippo, who really fought unbelievably in the case, taking it up to the Court of Appeal several times, being tried no less than 3 times. And with the last newly discovered evidence being, acquitted and exonerated. And here is his co-defendant on the same exact charge, sitting in Putnam County Correctional Center. We've asked for bail 3 times. Bail has been denied, even though Andy's a lifelong Putnam County resident, has already served 23 years. And so we don't expect that DA Tendy is going to do the right thing because he hasn't done the right thing in the last 10 years or so that this case has been going on. So we're pressing ahead. We find new evidence and stronger evidence all the time, and we're very confident that if we have a retrial, it'll result in an acquittal. But we really want to put pressure on the DA to try to do the right thing, and if not, perhaps ask the governor to intercede and transfer the case to the Attorney General's office. And so that's the next phase of the battle. And I thank everybody here for all the support they give to Andy and his family. He's made aware of it. He appreciates it. It uplifts him. And I think, a lot of the people who are on here, who are family members of those who were wrongfully convicted, know how important that is to just know that people are thinking about them, talking about them, and fighting for their case. So on his behalf, since he can't be with us here, but will be next year, that we thank you for the support you give to him.
Okay, so at this time, I would like to show the next slide, please. John Juca. So John Juca has served 16 years in prison. In a nutshell, 2 different people claimed that they heard John confessing to third parties. One of those, but their stories don't match. So John's apparently confessing to two different people, telling a different story, which of course is a hallmark of false testimony. And then on top of that, one of the people who claimed to have overheard John, that visit was supposed to have been with his father, but that would have been impossible because at that point, John's father had had a stroke and would have been unable to visit and engage in a conversation. So the case was so weak that another informant, John Avito, was used to claim that he too heard John confess. At this point, Avito has recanted. He admitted he got benefits for his testimony, which was denied explicitly by him at the trial. The trial prosecutor, Anna Siga Nicolazzi, not only allowed him to get away with that, but made the argument to the jury that he was getting no benefits for his testimony, that in fact, he was finally, for the first time in his life, trying to do the right thing, when actually that was not the case. In addition, he had psychological conditions. He was taking psychotropic medication. That was never disclosed. So since last year's wrongful conviction day event and now, John has had his conviction overturned unanimously on prosecutorial misconduct grounds. However, the Brooklyn District Attorney appealed the reversal to the New York Court of Appeals, which reinstated the conviction by a 6-1 vote on the grounds that supposedly this prosecutorial misconduct was harmless. In terms of the case's current posture, there is a new post-conviction motion centered around suppressed confession from the actual perpetrator early on, saying that it was his gun, and he never mentioned John at all. So that's the current motion. And right now, the hearing is scheduled for December 1st, and Doreen Giuliano, his mother, nicknamed Mother Justice by the press for her extreme efforts at uncovering evidence that John was wronged, is with us tonight, and I would just like her to make a brief statement or two, give us an update or anything that she would like to add today on Wrongful Conviction Day. Doreen.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jeff. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for having me, and hopefully we'll get justice. Court is December 1st. That's an evidentiary hearing based on the newfound evidence. I'm trying to bring awareness to all these wrongful convictions through a documentary and a movie, and hopefully that could get done. John sends his love. I send my love to you, Anthony, there in the background. And like I said, it'll be an evidentiary hearing here in Brooklyn, New York, on December 1st.
I'd like to get the next slide from Marina. And by the way, this slide right here is it's about Professor Bennett Gershman, who's considered to be the country's leading expert on prosecutorial misconduct, and you can see exactly what he thinks about the trial for which John Juca has been incarcerated. Next slide.
Yes, he said it was one of the worst cases of prosecutorial misconduct that he has ever seen.
So another very famous case, J.J. Velasquez, John Adrian Velasquez, convicted of murdering a retired NYPD officer in 1997. He has a 25 to life sentence. He currently has served 21 years. A 15-year Dateline investigations revealed eyewitness recantations and most recently withheld evidence that outlines JJ's innocence. Since last year, there is a new podcast called Unjust and Unsolved, which features JJ's case in one of their episodes. You can see the link that's up. Recently, there was an interview that went on television. People TV profiled John's case. He's currently seeking freedom through a habeas corpus petition, as well as a commutation from Governor Cuomo. JJ's mother, Maria Velasquez, is with us here tonight, and I would like to invite her similarly to take a minute or two and share anything she would like to.
Hi, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for inviting me this evening. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Hi, Tori and Anthony and everybody. It's very emotional, but as you can see, the fight continues. The fight is real. I will never give up the fight, and neither will my son. We continue to fight. Right now in October, we're getting ready to file for the clemency. You know, to Governor Cuomo, we have 10,000 signatures on a petition, and we have over 100 letters from community to lawyers to family members and friends that have written letters to Governor Cuomo asking for JJ's clemency. So at this time, I would just like to say that we, as mothers and family members, we need to continue this fight to keep the light on these wrongful convictions, because we are the people that need to make a change. We need to get out there and vote for the different politicians that will make changes in the laws and in the system that need to occur so that these wrongful convictions can be stopped, and that somewhere in the near future or in the future of our children, our grandchildren, there will no longer be wrongful convictions. As you can see through the years, a lot of wrongful convictions are being overturned. So our fight has to continue. We have to keep our stories alive in the media. We have to keep having these October 2nd, meetings where we come together and we discuss, what's going on with our family members, the people that have been exonerated, as yourself, Jeff. You continue to fight, Anthony DePippo, among the others. We have keep wrongful convictions out in the media, open to the public, so that we together can stop it.
Okay, thank you. At this time, Marina will send a link through the chat box. There is a petition on John Adrian Velasquez's website. You could add your name to it. The signatures on the petition are collected and are sent in, so that'll help. So Marina will send that through the chat, and also let's do the next slide, please. Michael DeLoe is still fighting for freedom. He's he's in his 11th year. There was a partial DNA found outside underwear, which does not match him. Charges were revenge motivated after his informing his ex-wife that he would be seeking full custody. He was denied his constitutional right to testify at trial. In terms of current status of case, there's a discovery motion pending in Washington County seeking the full DNA files. Also, other Brady violations have been discovered, so his position has gotten quite better since from last year to now, nonetheless not out. So at this time, I'm going to ask Marianne Lubis to make a brief statement. I need everybody just to please keep the statement short, because I do want to get our first panelist in who has to jump off by 7. So Marianne, if you're on, if you'd just like to give a brief statement, and then we'll move on. Marianne, are you there?
Me?
Yes,
Hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Marianne Lubis. I'm the mother of Michael DeLoe, who's in his 11th year of a wrongful conviction. I'd just like to thank very quickly the sponsors of tonight's event, It Can Happen to You Group, St. John's University, the Criminal Justice Association. But I especially like to thank the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, who has taken up our son's case. And by doing this, he has secured for us 2 phenomenal attorneys, Justin Bonus and Dan Forrest, and was also able to secure 3 expert witnesses. As Jeff has said, his case is now going for the other PCRA. We have a lot of good new evidence. It's difficult to explain the feelings of having someone that you love wrongfully convicted. You seem to live your life fine on the outside world, however, inside your heart is heavy and constantly worrying about what's going on with your loved one. I try to put it into words. If you were given like a diagnosis of cancer, that it goes on years and years and years, and you still don't have no cure or no reasoning for if this is going to end. But we must work towards changing legislation on the timeframes it gives to the defendants. The time frame for the defendant and the prosecutors need to be more in line with each other, and we must demand that the prosecutors are held accountable for hiding evidence like they did in our son's case, lying and covering up. Today is a day to remember the 2,674 exonerees since 1989, as well as those still fighting for their freedom. That's 23,950 years of life lost. How many more are still waiting? Thank you.
And then the last slide. So we got John Brookins. Prosecutorial misconduct was a cause. He's been in for 28 years. It's a life without parole sentence. An expert testified that hair didn't match John, and the prosecutor continued to refer to the hairs in the court as if they were his. Tunnel vision is another factor. Police did not pursue the actual perpetrator, even though multiple statements were given to them that an alternative suspect killed her mother. Ineffective assistance of counsel, and that counsel failed to call a witness who saw the alternative suspect full of blood. An alibi witness was not called, and other witnesses were not spoken to. The lawyer who said that the police were threatening them. Currently, DNA testing is being sought on scissors and a trophy, both of which were used in the murder. He's represented by the Innocence Project, Craig Cooley, while also being assisted by the Georgetown Prison and Justice Initiative under the direction of Marty Tancliffe, a lawyer and an exoneree, and Mark Howard. You can see about the podcast, and there's also his website. In terms of case status, is pending a decision now in terms of whether he's going to get the DNA tested or not. He's also seeking commutation. So, Karen, if you're there, Karen Mills, if you'd like to make a brief statement. We really need to keep it down to like a minute because I need to keep the program moving. Our first panelist has to be off by 7. So please make a brief statement if you're with us, Karen. Karen? All right, maybe she didn't make it on. So while it's somber to think about people still waiting, we also have to remember the people that did make it out. This is not a hopeless situation. This is a hard situation, but it's not a hopeless situation. So now I want to change the tenor a little bit about the people who have made it out. So the first person, we're going to do the announcement of exonerees now. The first person I'd like to go to is Valentino Dixon.
Hi, everybody. I spent 27 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. 8 witnesses cleared me this crime, and the person who committed the crime confessed. However, my court-appointed attorney did not present any of this evidence before the jury. He didn't call one single witness on my behalf, and the district attorney withheld physical evidence, forensic evidence that cleared me of the crime, and this was revealed after 27 years. I actually had to develop myself as an artist and draw myself out of prison, getting national attention because all my appeals had been denied. I started a foundation called The Art of Freedom to help fight wrongful convictions and to make the system more fair, just, and equal.
Thank you. Okay, Karen, I see a message in the chat box. Karen Mills, are you able to? You want to take one more shot at saying something real quick? Okay, the next person actually is sitting next to me, whose name's already been called. He's already been prominent in the event. Anthony DePippo. And again, we're going to keep all these to like a minute, and then we'll go to our first panelist.
Hello, people. I see a lot of friends out there tonight. I see a lot of new faces. Hi, everybody. I can't say all your names. Anthony DePippo. I did 20 years wrongfully convicted for rape and murder I didn't commit in the county of Putnam. Arrested, falsely accused, and finally was able to prove the true perpetrator of the crime. I am the co-defendant of Andy Krivak, and we just got to keep fighting. And the families of the loved ones. Today is a day to remember those in prison and to celebrate those who are free. Very happy to be here, and I appreciate you all. I love you all, and hope to see you very soon after this COVID.
And the next exoneree I'd like to introduce for him to take a minute. will be Rodney Roberts. Rodney, last, all right.
Hello?
Okay, go ahead, Rodney. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Rodney.
Hello, my name is Rodney Roberts, as it said. I spent 18 years wrongfully convicted in New Jersey State Prison for a sexual offense and a kidnap. I was exonerated March 14, 2014 by DNA evidence. Upon my release, one of the key features that helped my life move forward was Jeff Dexovitz himself, who contacted me and helped me reintegrate back to society with his program and the social support I needed. So the Jeff Dexovitz Foundation, thank you.
Next person I'm going to go to now is Doug DeLosa. Doug DeLosa.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. My name is Doug DeLosa. I was convicted of second-degree murder in Louisiana, served 14 years in prison. During that period of time, I was denied 21 times in the state court. Finally, I filed a pro se motion in the federal court, and they reversed my conviction. And I've been home nearly 20 years now. And all I can tell everybody out there is don't give up, because it took me 22 times before I finally won. Good luck to everybody. God bless.
The next exoneree we're going to go to is unmute yourself, please.
Here, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead. You got the floor.
All right. My name is Daniel Villegas. I was convicted in Texas in 1995 for capital murder. I got charged with it actually in 1993. Was given a two capital life sentences, and I finally won my case. 2018 by jury trial, not guilty. And since then, I've been working for a construction company, and now I work for a law firm right here.
Congratulations, Daniel. Next exoneree. Not an exoneree yet, but fighting to be exonerated, but nonetheless free. A man whose name is well known to those of us deep into the innocent circles, Barry Beach. Barry.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can. Please continue. Yes.
Yeah,
We're just keeping it short because I want to go to our first speaker in like 3 or 4 minutes.
My name's Barry Beach. I was convicted of deliberate homicide in the state of Montana. I served 28 years and 9 months before I was initially given an evidentiary hearing where we brought forth 22 witnesses who identified the actual perpetrator of the crime. I was released by a district judge based on that new evidence. The Montana Attorney General then appealed that to the Montana Supreme Court. That ruling was reversed, and I was actually sent back to Montana State Prison for an additional 2.5 years, during which we changed the laws in the state of Montana, allowing the governor to have sole power over executive clemency. I currently am released on executive clemency, where they commuted my sentence to time served, and I have 6 more years of probation to serve with the state of Montana's Department of Corrections. But part of my fight and my battle was the creation of the Montana Innocence Project, and we have now released, based on DNA evidence and others, 7 exonerees here in the state of Montana through the Montana Innocence Project. So thank you for everybody's support out there.
Excellent work. Again, keeping it short. We've seen a plethora of men who've spoken, but wrongful conviction, much like it visits law enforcement, as we're going to learn tonight in details, it also impacts women. I'd like Sammy Werkheiser to take a minute to say something.
Hi, Jeff Deskovic. I am so happy to be here. I want to thank Jeffrey Deskovic because he actually came to prison, to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, where I was serving 12 years to life sentence, and he came to visit me. He's been behind me the whole time. I'm happy to say that although I suffered 2 public trials, the first time I was sentenced 12 years to life, and the second time I was sentenced 15 years flat. When I was convicted, I got 1 acquittal and 1 guilty charge. Since then, as an incarcerated woman, I gave birth to twins. My baby daughter passed away 22 minutes after birth. My baby son will be 7 years old on Veterans Day. I've had a full conviction reversal after my second appeal, indictments dismissed, and many people do not look back after they come out. And what I want to say about Jeffrey Deskovic is not only has he looked back for his friends and for his sisters, but he has become a lawyer and a champion for those who are wrongfully convicted. Say thank you for all of your work thus far, and thank you and congratulations to everyone on this call. Please check out Mother on the Inside on Facebook. Thanks.
Veronica Taft. Veronica Taft. Veronica, you on?
I'm trying
One
to
more time.
I'm trying to fix it. Oh, there we go.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Hi, my name is Veronica Taft. I was convicted on murder in the 2nd degree and manslaughter in the 1st degree on a 25 to life sentence for the murder of my son. On my first appeal after 5.5 years, by the grace of God, I won it on weight of evidence. I'm only the 67th person in the United States to ever get that kind of appeal. And I got all my kids went to foster care, got them back, and I'm still working on getting one of them back home. I gave birth in jail and that whole shindig. But here I am, and me and my friends put together Women's on the Inside. People want to check that out, you know. And Jeffrey, thank you so much for doing things like this. Seriously.
Thank you. Okay, last person. I want to just ask, did Ashley Long ever make it on? Ashley on or no? Okay, so apparently she did not make it on. So at this point, I'm going to turn the program back over to Marina, so she can introduce our first panelist.
Thank you.
We'll go with Jennifer first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. And I wish we could have a round of applause right now for everybody in acknowledgement of everybody's stories and everybody who we heard from today. Our first panelist today is Ms. Jenny Holtzclaw. Jenny has been fighting for 6 years now for her wrongfully convicted and wrongfully imprisoned brother, Officer Daniel Holtzclaw. Despite zero direct forensic evidence, Daniel has so far been wrongfully imprisoned for 5 years in Oklahoma for sexual assault, and his family and Jenny at the forefront are tirelessly fighting for justice to be restored. And I'm not going to go into the details of the story, as I'm sure Jenny will. So please welcome Ms. Jenny Holtzclaw. Jenny? Jenny? Hello? She seems to be here, but I'm not sure what's going on. Jenny?
Her name is in the chat. Her name is here as a participant.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Holtzclaw. I'm the sister of Daniel Holtzclaw, and I have been fighting for him for the last 6 years. Daniel was an Oklahoma City police officer who was convicted in 2015 of sexual. Many of you may have seen his viral sentencing video, that profile case. It's been documented on a few documentaries currently right now. There was a total of 13 accusers, 36 alleged crimes, 17 alleged crime scenes, but not a single witness, not a single piece of direct forensic evidence, and yet he was sentenced to 263 years in prison. The case started with a single false sexual assault allegation, lacking forensic evidence to corroborate it. But detectives believe Daniel was guilty even before interviewing and interrogating him. From that allegation alone, the detectives reverse engineered the case and went through the last 6 months of Daniel's records of whom he had pulled over and only questioned one race, which was Black females who had records of arrest, prostitution, and drug history. Daniel had pulled over every single race, but for some reason, the detectives specifically went after one specific race. The investigation ended up with 21 allegations, including a male who claimed Daniel sexually assaulted him. But 8 were determined to be false right away, which media never reported. 13 accusers went to trial, making wrongful allegations against Daniel. And the entire case was horribly biased investigation and ended in an unethical prosecutor lying to the jurors right before deliberation about the DNA evidence in the case. That's the high clip of the case, and you can follow me on Facebook underneath Jenny Holtz. And then also Justice for Daniel Holtzclaw. There's an in-depth podcast that you can hear more on his case. And if you're interested in watching the documentaries, you can go onto YouTube and just type in Daniel Holtzclaw, and you'll see the main one I would like everyone to watch is the one that's called Daniel in the Den. It's a very good in-depth high level of Daniel's case, and you'll see exactly why there's so many people fighting for Daniel. Currently, there's a petition right now with over 50,000 signatures, and we're continuing trying to get the governor of Oklahoma to pay attention to this case, along with several other cases of the wrongfully convicted in Oklahoma, such as Julius Jones is another one. I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me. Okay.
We can still hear you.
Okay.
Are you done, or was there something else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's the high level of Daniel's case. You know,
Can you mention where it is now in terms of what the latest efforts are in trying to overturn the conviction? I didn't hear that part of it.
Yeah. So the direct appeal was denied, and also the Supreme Court just recently denied Daniel's case. We are currently working on Daniel's post-conviction, which is due of March of 2021, and then Daniel's civil trial, which is where the accusers are trying to go after the city for millions. That one's delayed right now just because of COVID till beginning of spring of 2021. So we are currently still getting new evidence. Kathleen Zellner did several depositions on to obtain a lot of good information that we'll be able to use for Daniel's post-conviction.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Jenny.
Thank you.
We wish you lots of courage and energy and hope for your fight here. Our next guest is Mr. Herman Atkins, and Mr. Atkins has served 12 years for a sexual assault he did not commit based on a misidentification in his case. Following his exoneration, and I'm not going to go into the details, again, I'm sure he will, but following his exoneration, Mr. Atkins has obtained a degree in psychology, and he currently is also closing in on his law degree. Mr. Atkins is an avid advocate for the innocence movement and has been instrumental in the fight for increasing the compensation to the wrongfully convicted in the state of California, where he's from and where he got his wrongful conviction, from a maximum of $10,000 to $100 for each day of wrongful imprisonment. So please welcome Mr. Herman Atkins.
I'd like to just add that Herman is the son of a California highway patrolman. Herman, please take it away.
Yes, I want to thank you, Jeffrey, for first inviting me to this event. It's the first time I've participated in Exoneration Day and what have you. I was wrongfully convicted in 1987 in the city of Riverside, California, where I received a 47-year and 8-month prison sentence for two counts of rape, 2 counts of oral copulation, 1 count of robbery, and 1 count of kidnap. I was sentenced to do that time. I did 12 of the 47 years and 8 months before DNA testing proved that I was factually innocent. Once I was proven factually innocent, we found out during a civil trial in 2007 that I had been wrongfully convicted as a result of police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, as well as junk science. Once it was proven that much of the damage was done by Riverside Police Department, we were successfully suing them, and at which time I won a $2 million settlement. And at that time, after that, I was actually going to become a psychologist, but I switched up and decided to become an attorney because I found that I was much needed there to help those that have been wrongfully convicted with an understanding of being in prison and what have you. And so before I even had a chance to know Jeffrey, we kind of like walked in the same path and what have you. And so my goal is simple. You know, I want to tear down the justice system with my brothers and sisters behind me. We are a subculture. We're no longer taking shorts. You got to pay attention to us. It's that many of us. And so anything that I could do to assist any one of you guys that have a foundation or an organization, what have you, feel free to call up on me. You can reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and a couple of more other things. And then Jeffrey, you can always get in contact with me, my Jeffrey. Can you? Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. We have a bit of a change. Felipe.
So Felipe's wife actually literally had a fall, and he had to take her to the hospital. So he was trying to get finished with that, but hospitals are what they are. So I'm going to try to call him now, but we're going to instead move on to the next speaker. Marina will introduce him. I'll call Felipe one more time, and if he can't participate, we will continue without him. Certainly, everyone's health comes before events.
So, all right. So in this case, we are going to, I'm going to introduce an esteemed professor whom I had the pleasure to get to know first as a graduate student and then as a colleague, and most recently also as a collaborator on research. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Matthew Barry Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the author of the book Wrongful Conviction in Sexual Assault from Oxford University Press, which has just become available for purchase, and I'll be sharing the link to the publisher's website where you can get it in the comments box in just a minute. The book is focused on the increased risk of wrongful convictions associated with sexual assault and particularly stranger rape. Professor Johnson is on the psychology faculty at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, CUNY. His publications and testimony have been cited favorably in New Jersey Supreme Court decisions. He served on the executive committee of New Jerseyans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, which is the lead organization in the successful campaign that abolished the death penalty in New Jersey in 2007. He also was a member of the American Bar Association section on individual rights and responsibilities, task force on mental disability and the death penalty. In 2013, Professor Johnson was elected to the board of the National Association of Black Psychologists, and he authored the organization's death penalty abolition resolution, as well as a public policy paper on the death penalty. Throughout his career, he has been active as a scholar and an advocate in matters related to psychology and law, and has consulted and provided expert testimony on numerous legal cases involving coerced coercive interrogation practices, as well as false confessions. So please welcome Dr. Matthew Johnson.
Well, thank you. I hope people can hear me. And first, I want to thank Professor Sorachensky for that wonderful and generous introduction. Thank you so much. I appreciate being invited to this event. And it's the first time I participated in International Wrongful Conviction Day, and I intend to be here again next year. Also, just want to extend a couple of personal acknowledgments and hellos. Jeffrey Deskovic, a longtime colleague of mine, and he studied at John Jay College with me. And I appreciate him and so proud of him, his accomplishments. I really can't say enough, so I don't want to keep going on and on. You all, I think everybody appreciates Jeffrey, what he's accomplished and what he represents. I also want to say hello to Dr. Zena Crenshaw-Logow, who I think is on. And I didn't expect to contact her tonight, but me and her were also on a call last night for the People's Organization for Progress, which is a grassroots organization I'm a member of in New Jersey. But we're here to talk about wrongful conviction. And I want to talk a little bit about my research in my book that was just recently become available. Dr. Sorachensky, do you have that? Can you make that document I sent you available on the screen? I sent her something earlier today that I thought would be useful to illustrate some of my work briefly. And I should also mention that my book actually present and talk about Jeffrey Deskovic's wrongful conviction, as well as Herman Atkins. Both of them were wrongfully convicted in stranger rapes. So just briefly, what we did at John Jay College, the research group that I was directing, which was composed entirely of students, many of them were undergraduate students, a couple were graduate students, was that we decided to look at all of the confirmed exonerations in the United States and to disaggregate them based upon offense. And what we found, if you look at the top here, I don't know if you guys can see that, wrongful convictions. Obviously, there are thousands of people who are in prison who have been wrongfully convicted, but have not been able to establish their innocence as of yet. So we don't know about the entire universe. But among those that have been confirmed, what is apparent is that a large majority of the cases involve sexual assault charges, sexual assault allegations, among all of the confirmed wrongful convictions. If you look at the Innocence Project data, this is data from 2017, so this is a few years ago. But at that point, there were like 346 exonerations on the Innocence Project website. Of the 346 exonerations, 300 of them were for sexual assault. So that just shows you how prevalent sexual charges are among the confirmed wrongful convictions. So what we did from there is we looked more closely at the sexual assault. And you see here a box for sexual assault that would include sexual assaults where there was also a homicide. And then another box for murders alone. And then obviously there are other cases that involve other types of crime, but they're actually are not a large proportion. And so among the sexual assaults, there are stranger rapes where victims are assaulted by someone whom they had no prior relationship with. There are acquaintance rapes where people were assaulted by someone who they knew. And actually acquaintance rapes are the most common type of rape. About 70, 75, 76, vary somewhere from different researchers. But about 75% of all sexual assaults, victims are attacked by someone they knew. They're acquaintance rapes. Stranger rapes are a small proportion of all rapes. They're about 22 or 23 or 24% stranger rapes. Then you also have cases where people are sexually assaulted, typically children are sexually assaulted by family members. Very unfortunate. Obviously, all of this is unfortunate, but very unfortunate situation where children are victimized by people in their family, siblings, parents, aunts and uncles, or whatever, you know. So what we found was that among the sexual assaults, stranger rapes were like 70% of all the sexual assaults were stranger rapes, where in fact, stranger rapes are much less common than acquaintance rapes. So obviously there's some factors, there's some features in stranger rapes that are resulting in them being so disproportionately apparent among the wrongfully convicted. And then we looked at that more closely. And we came up with something that's an important finding, and that I don't think it has been identified by any other researcher groups in the United States or in other countries. We found that there are two basic patterns among the stranger rapes. There are those cases where victims survived the attack, and there were those cases where the victims did not survive the attack. So we refer to the cases where the victim survived the attack as capable victim cases. And we refer to the cases where the victims did not survive the attack as cases where there was an incapacitated victim. And I will talk about that briefly now, and I will use Herman Atkins' case and Jeffrey Debsicovic's case. In Herman Atkins' case, the victim had been sexually assaulted by a stranger. There was no question this was not a false rape charge case, which those do occur, but they're actually less frequent. The victim was attacked and assaulted sexually in the retail store, as Mr. Atkins noted a few moments ago. She survived the attack. She was investigated. There was a rape kit was taken, but she could not reliably identify who assaulted her. And she saw a photo of Herman Atkins that had nothing to do with the offense. She thought he looked like the person that attacked her, and she subsequently identified him. Then after that, law enforcement went out and got someone else to confirm that wrong identification. And this is what we refer to as multiple eyewitness misidentification, where you have multiple people making the same error, which points directly to police misconduct, or at least police negligence. And this phenomenon of multiple eyewitness misidentification is not uncommon. It occurs in many cases. But where there are capable victims who endured these attacks, which clearly are traumatic, it's difficult for them to make reliable identifications of a stranger. It's not like it's someone they knew before. And this results in wrongful convictions with capable victims. The other category are victims who are incapacitated, victims who are either deceased, who were killed in the attack, or in attacks such as the well-known Central Park jogger attack. The victim survived, but because she suffered severe brain damage, she could not recall the attack. So she essentially was incapable of assisting in the investigation. When law enforcement authorities are faced with that set of circumstances, they don't have a witness. They tend to rely on what? Interrogation and confession. And they come up with false confessions. This is what happened in the Central Park jogger case. This is what happened in the Jeffrey Debsicovic's case. Unfortunately, the victim that was assaulted by, I think the actual perpetrator was a man named Stephen Cunningham. There was erroneous investigation where they assumed that the victim had been attacked by an acquaintance. They focused the investigation on the victim's high school classmates in the community where Jeffrey lived. Jeffrey was a high school classmate who was very concerned and upset by this assault in his hometown. And they mistakenly begun to target Jeffrey. It was an inaccurate profile that was generated by the NYPD for the Westchester County prosecutor. This led to Jeffrey's targeting. And as you all know, Jeffrey was interrogated over many days. He was 16 years old. He was coercively interrogated, and he was separate. He had no attorney. He was separated from his family. And after a lengthy period of interrogation, where they used the good cop, bad cop routine on him, and he felt threatened for his life, he made an admission that led to his eventual conviction. Jeffrey was eventually exonerated, but we need to point out, I don't know if this has been said before, Jeffrey was DNA excluded before trial. Before he went to trial, they knew Jeffrey did not match crime scene semen, but the prosecutors concocted and invented this theory to try to proceed with the prosecution of Jeffrey, despite the fact that he was excluded prior to trial. So what we found is that among the confirmed wrongful convictions, that sexual offenses predominate, and then not only do sexual offenses predominate, but stranger rape cases predominate. And that there are two basic methods that are used to convict people falsely in these cases. It's by misidentifications or it's by false confessions. And then in addition to that, the law enforcement, the police and or prosecutors, that they get other evidence, which we refer to as secondary evidence. In the Central Park jogger case, after they had the confessions from the 5 juveniles, which, by the way, they had those 36 hours after the victim was found. And at that point, the case was essentially over with. But they concoct they're able to concoct, or the term we use is manufacture other evidence to support the false confession, as occurred in Jeffrey's case. In a similar way, in Herman Atkins' case, they manufactured the second identification. And so you have this process of really looking at and understanding prosecutorial evidence, that many times the evidence is not discovered, the evidence is actually manufactured by law enforcement and prosecutors in the course of the investigation. So those are some of the things that we've been identifying. Can we look at the next slide real quickly, please? So this is another visual from the book that was recently released, and I just want to show you because I have Jeffrey Deskovic listed here as well as Herman Atkins. And earlier, several people referred to the phenomena of tunnel vision. And essentially, I developed this as a way to try to clarify tunnel vision a bit more, because I think that there's some inadequacies conceptually with tunnel vision. I mean, tunnel vision is an important concept, and it helps us understand wrongful conviction. I sought to supplement it with this, what I refer to as a continuum of intentionality. So what we have here are cases where there were misidentifications and led to wrongful convictions. And then we have cases where there were false confessions that led to wrongful convictions. The misidentifications, the manufactured evidence was probably more inadvertent, where in the false confessions, the manufactured evidence was more intentional. And why do we say that? We say that because we understand, with regard to criminal interrogation and confession, that police interrogate people because they've decided that the person is guilty, and they want to get evidence from the person to support their belief, whether that belief is correct or not. So it's much more intentional than misidentifications. But Herman Atkins' misidentification wasn't completely inadvertent. As I described to you, there was a second witness that they got to misidentify him. Another outstanding thing about Mr. Atkins' case, and please, Herman, chime in if I don't get this right, because this was remarkable to me when I read it. Herman Atkins, they put him in a lineup and brought the victim to identify him in the lineup. And in this lineup, Herman Atkins was the only African-American person in the lineup. So, I mean, if that's not, if that was a movie script, they would say that's not believable. But this is what we mean by manufacturing evidence. A lineup such as that, there was no way the victim was going to pick out anybody but Herman Atkins. So it really shows you what we're up against when we talk about the manufacture of evidence. And one other point on this figure, I hope it makes some sense to some folks. When we talk about the false confessions being more intentional, over here furthest to the right, I have a couple of cases. This is Earl Washington, who was from Virginia, and Cruz and Hernandez, they were from the Chicago area. Not only were these people interrogated to the point where they gave false incriminating statements, also the law enforcement officers who gave testimony at the trial overtly lied in court. They overtly lied in court. So this was clearly very, very intentional. Can we look at the next slide, please? So this is the final slide I want to show you guys and share with people. I'm interested in feedback if people would like to provide it. I'll give you my email address in a moment. But this is another figure that's in the book that presents these two different paths in wrongful conviction. So where you have incapacitated victim, as was the case in Jeffrey Deskovic's case, the police rely on coerced false confessions, and then they try to find other secondary evidence to support the false confession. Sometimes this comes in the form of incentivized testimony from informants. Sometimes it comes in the form of flawed scientific evidence. For example, in the Central Park Jockey case, after they coerced the confession from the 5 juveniles, they got a so-called lab analyst to say that they had discovered on one of the defendants, on the victim, matched one of the defendants. That was an erroneous evidence. And the second path, where we have capable victims, as occurred in Herman Atkins' case, there's misidentification, and then this also is often supplemented by flawed science or incentivized testimony. So in closing, I want to say that the DNA revolution in criminal justice investigation has been substantial. We knew that there were many wrongful convictions prior to the advent of DNA evidence, but we were up against obstacles to illustrate and to identify the scope of the problem. With DNA is only active in maybe 8 to 10% of criminal cases. It's a very small proportion of criminal cases that have DNA evidence. However, the DNA revolution has been so valuable because it has showed us and has demonstrated clearly that other forms of evidence that were regarded as being highly reliable, such as eyewitness identifications, such as confessions, such as fingerprint evidence, such as bite mark evidence, these other forms of evidence are frequently erroneous. In closing, I want to say another area that I'm working on is wrongful conviction and shaken baby syndrome. Me and my colleagues have recently prepared a paper on that that's available. If anybody's interested in it, they can contact me. I don't want to take up time putting my email address on the board, but I'm easy to find. If you can Google me, Matthew B. Johnson or Matthew Barry Johnson, John J. College of Criminal Justice, you can get my email address and you can email me. Be happy to hear from people who are at our presentation tonight and have questions or have comments or have suggestions for me as we continue our research. Thank you so much.
Sure, Marina will put Dr. Johnson's email address through the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. So just wanted to check in quickly. Felipe, is he coming? No? Jeff?
No, Felipe is not coming, but I would like to get a brief word from a member of one of the co-sponsoring organizations. It could happen to you. So our head of our Pennsylvania chapter, it could happen to you, Pennsylvania, Millie Saliga, would like to make a brief remark about on behalf of that co-sponsoring organization. Millie?
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. Jeffrey has worked with me over the last few years, and prior to that, I was doing independent work with some of the legislators to try to get things changed. And I'm really happy to see all the people that are involved here tonight. It's very important for us to work together because there's much work to be done. And Pennsylvania is definitely one of the states that are more regressive. We are making some progress. It's slow, but we will not give up. Right now, the expungement bill is going to the floor of the Senate. We're trying to get amendments to that. And then after that, we're going to work on compensation and a commission on prosecutor conduct. There's different things in Pennsylvania that other states have that we don't, like required interrogation videotaping. You know, it's very important to have videotaping when someone's being interrogated to eliminate any of the guesswork. So my son was convicted back in early 2014 of multiple armed robberies, basically on the word of a couple co-defendants. What they said was a confession with no proof of such. And there was a lot of misconduct. So we have to prevent these kind of things. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. And we all got to continue to work together for positive change. Too many people have lost too many years of their lives in prison. And it was through what happened to my son, witnessing that firsthand, that got me motivated. And I got involved in politics, and I am an elected official for the last, I guess, about 5 years. I'll be running for re-election next year. But that gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of people. And that's where I met Stuart Greenleaf, who was our speaker last year at our first summit in Pennsylvania. And he was really trying to make things change. But as we all know, there's a lot of politics involved in parties, and you know, you have to get the majority to get things passed. That's how we get things changed. And we're going to continue to do that work here in Pennsylvania, as they're doing out in California. And Jeffrey and Bill Bastek, who is the chair of the New York chapter, Bill Bastek, they did a tremendous job in New York in getting the first commission passed back in 2018. I'm very proud of them for that and their dedication to our efforts. Thank you to everyone, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
So I'd like to just give 2 minutes. So Karen Mills had technical issues earlier. She was going to say something on behalf of John Brookins. Karen, can you take 2 minutes? Karen?
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Jeffrey, for inviting me here tonight. And I want to say thank you to everyone for participating and remaining strong for those that are incarcerated, and congratulations to those who are out. As you know, I just want to follow what Jeff said. He's already explained everything about my husband John's case. Right now, we're just waiting on DNA approval or DNA appeal to be approved by the Superior Court on the Eastern State, and also John's running up for commutation very shortly. He does have the support of Lieutenant Governor Fetterman in the state of Pennsylvania. I just want to say also that I'm happy to be a part of this organization. I met Millie through Jeffrey, and I have worked with Millie in the past and Jeffrey, and we've gone to Harrisburg and we've pounded the pavements there. So I just want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And if you could please just be sure to tune in to Undisclosed to learn more about my husband's case, and bringbrookinshome.com. And congratulations to Ronnie Long and Krivak and everyone else. I just can't remember all the names now. Thank you.
I see that exoneree Larry Trent Roberts has joined us. Larry, would you like to briefly say something? Unmute yourself, my brother.
You're right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Larry Trent Roberts. I just got exonerated last year, September the 17th. I was incarcerated for 13 years and 8 months. I'm just happy to be a part of this tonight and hear everybody's story. And to the mothers that's out there, that's and the people that's supporting us, hey, we appreciate it when we in there. You know, we appreciate y'all. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to reintroduce and call Jeffrey Deskovic again, and I won't give the full-length introduction again, but hopefully everybody remembers all of his accomplishments. There will be a test at the end. I'm just kidding. Please welcome Jeffrey Deskovic.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to be long. In a nutshell, I spent 16 years in prison. I was arrested when I was 16 for a murder and rape I didn't commit. I got bailed out. I turned 17 before the trial started. I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape. Despite a pre-trial negative DNA test result, the wrongful conviction was caused by a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender. We unpacked that a little bit. So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they would talk to me as if I was a suspect, and the other half the time they would pretend like they needed my help to solve the crime. They would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would congratulate me that my opinions were correct, and they made me feel important. So eventually they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. And I want to mention when they would interrogate me, they had me thrown off balance, because on one hand they were coming at me like a suspect, and when they would push too hard and I would become afraid and withdrawn, then they would switch up, and that's when Jeff, as the junior detective investigator helper theme was pushed. So on a school day, I went to the police station for this test, and because it was a school day, my mother and grandmother thought that I was in school, so they had no idea that anything was wrong, so they didn't call around looking for me. They drove me to the town of Brewster, which was in Putnam County, whereas I was a native of Peekskill in Westchester County, and it was about 40 minutes away by car, which meant that I was not able to leave anymore on my own. I was instead dependent upon the police. I didn't have an attorney present. I wasn't given anything to eat the entire time I was there. There were 3 officers who came with me from Peekskill, but then there was also the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens, who was dressed as a civilian. He was a polygraphist. He never identified himself as a cop. So I want to harken back, what I'm explaining he did to me. He did something very similar to Andy Krivak. So he gave me countless cups of coffee to get me nervous, and he attached me to this poly, and then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. As each hour passed, my fear increased in proportion to the time. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean? You didn't do it. You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." So when he said that, it really shot fear through the roof. At that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he'd been holding them off but could not do so any longer, that I had to help myself. When he added that if I did as they wanted, that I could go home afterwards, that I was not going to be arrested. Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, I was only concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was, that nobody else knew where I was either, loomed very large in my mind. I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. The possibility of harm being thrown in the air, and then this false life preserver, all of those things added up into enough that I made a decision to make up a story based upon the information which they had given me in the course of the interrogation, both that day and in the 6 weeks run up to it. By the end of everything, I collapsed into a fetal position on the floor. I was crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape. The DNA test result came in from the FBI lab, which showed that semen found on the victim didn't match me. The prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud. He suddenly claimed 6 months after doing the original autopsy, he suddenly remembers that he forgot to document medical evidence that he claimed showed that the victim had been sexually active, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that it didn't matter, that the DNA didn't match me, That didn't mean that I was innocent, that there was yet another person that she must have slept with prior to my murdering and raping her. Taking it a step further, he named another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, yet he never tried to support that. He never got a DNA sample from him. He never even called him as a witness to give verbal testimony to that effect. He simply made the unsupported argument to the jury. At the same time, my public defender essentially did not defend me. He never called as a witness my alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that that proved that the confession was coerced and false. He rarely met with me. He never should have represented me because of a conflict of interest, because this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of Westchester County Legal Aid. That conflict prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. It prevented the defense from asking him for a DNA sample to explode the whole consensual sex theory. When it was time to cross-examine the medical examiner, he stood up in open court and with a big smile on his face said to the medical examiner, "You're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you." And he wouldn't allow me to take the stand. I wanted to mention that when I was interrogated, it was not a video recorded, it was not audio recorded, there was no signed confession. So as a result of that, the cops were able to lie when they came to court. They left the threat and false promise out of their story. I wanted to testify at the pre-trial hearing to put those facts on the record, but he wouldn't allow me to. When the prosecution's case was finished at trial and it was time for the defense to go, I wanted to take the stand, but he wouldn't allow me to. He told me it wasn't his job to prove that I was innocent. It was up to the prosecution to prove I was guilty, and he didn't think that that had happened. Well, as you all well know, that's a very naive way to practice law. There's an 80% conviction rate in cases that feature a confession. And so if your client is charged with a crime featuring a confession, you have to answer that confession. You have to have your client take the stand and explain why they falsely confessed. You have to explain 5 ways to Sunday how it's false. You got to put on alibis. Every way you can attack that confession, you have to, and then bring it all together in your closing argument and hope like hell that the jury can wrap their head around the idea that an innocent person would confess. But he didn't do any of that. And as a result, I was wrongfully convicted. And I'd like to show a couple of slides because I wasn't the adult that you see now. So the first slide, this is my mugshot. Next slide. This is me in the courtroom after it was announced that the jury had reached a verdict, but prior to the decision being read. The next slide. That's me in the courtroom. I was given a 15 to life sentence because I had been charged as an adult, and I was sentenced as an adult, and I was sent to a men's maximum security prison. Next slide. This is me shortly after arriving at Elmira Correctional Facility. Obviously a very dangerous place. Next slide. This is me when the conviction was overturned October 22nd, 2006. I would report back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds. I'll show the next slide. Starting the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, where we freed 7 people. We have 11 cases that we're active on now. Speaking to the frequency of wrongful conviction, with the red ties, Fernando Bermudez, who did 18 years before being exonerated. He was misidentified by 5 people. To my left is Jabbar Collins, who did 16 years, and you might recognize the fellow next to him is Raymond Santana from Central Park 5 case. Next slide. First person we exonerated was William Lopez, who did 23 and a half years in a shotgun murder in Brooklyn. He had a pre-existing legal team that had been with him for about 9 years, so we did some investigative work, and kind of like a building is built, but was missing a section, so we put that in. Bill was exonerated, and he passed away after about a year and a half of being free after doing the 23 and a half years. So you might say that his entire adult life was stolen from him. Next slide. is William Hawley with the red tie on, who did 8 years and 4 months in an arson wrongful conviction that was actually an electrical fire. So in that one, the Putnam DA stipulated that he was innocent. We did that case in-house. Next slide. So this was just a quick picture when I got the master's degree with my thesis on wrongful conviction, cause and reform. And the next slide was when I got my law degree in May of 2019. So really quickly, I want to just mention wrongful conviction causes are, yeah, we can stop sharing the screen. Causes of wrongful conviction, we've talked about coerced false confessions coming in at 25% in the DNA cases, and misidentification as a leading cause at 75%, lying informants at 15%. Prosecutorial misconduct is a thread that runs through almost all of the cases. Certainly bad lawyering is another aspect of that. We've talked tonight about tunnel vision. So really quickly, that's when you form a conclusion and then you ignore all evidence to the contrary, you just look for evidence that confirms what you already think and ignore the rest of the evidence rather than being led by the evidence. So there has been a short documentary called Conviction. That's a 21-minute documentary short. It's available on Amazon Prime, and I'd like to invite Gia Works. Well, actually, no, we'll show a short trailer. Marina, can we show the short trailer, and then Gia will share a few words with us. I don't think we're hearing any sound, Marina. We try that one more time from the beginning, just with got no sound. I would hope that they would look at me as being just as innocent as they are. I mean, I'm the same as them, except that I was arrested for something that I didn't do, and they were not. At the time of the crime, she was 15. I was 16. These two men got out of a car, and they had on long trench coats, and they called my name, pretend like they needed my help to solve the crime. They got a psychological profile from the NYPD, and I happened to fit that psychological profile. The police spoke to a lot of students in the high school, and some of them told the police they might want to talk to me because I was quiet and to myself and I didn't really fit in there. I was charged with murder and rape. I'd like to invite Gia Works to share a few words about 5 or 6 minutes.
Hey, Jeff,
Gia?
thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I'll just take a minute, but it was such a pleasure working with you, Jeff, on the film. And as you guys can all see, Jeff is such an open book with a story and such a great advocate that it was my job was very easy, I gotta say. I'll tell you a little bit about me. As Marina stated at the beginning, a flame was really ignited inside me when I read Reuben Carter's book, The 16th Round, about 2 decades ago. And it really just stuck with me my entire life at that. I knew I always wanted to do something to help people or raise awareness for people who've been wrongfully convicted. And so through filmmaking, I really got that opportunity. And then we released this short just last month, and we've gotten quite a bit of, great feedback, and a handful of film festivals have selected it and played it. So that's been great. And I'm currently working in post-production on a feature-length film about Jeff's life story. So that's what I'm working on now. For anyone that wants to check out the film, it's on Amazon Prime. And my future goal is really to tell and cover stories of people who are currently wrongfully convicted, so that we can hopefully positively impact their case, or at the very, very least, give a voice to people who've been silenced through the justice system unjustly. And that's really it. That's what I'm working on.
All right, so I think at this time I'm going to send it back to Marina, and let's do Q&A.
Thank you, everyone. So I haven't seen any questions come up so far in the chat, except for the question about sharing the recording, which I will happily do. I cannot share the slides, the PowerPoint slides, unless Dr. Johnson.
I want to make a quick question and comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Marina. I want Jeffrey to talk about a couple things about his case that I think are important. I stepped away for a few moments, but I don't think we've talked about crimes committed by the actual offenders. And that's a big part of understanding our fight against wrongful conviction. So I would like Jeffrey to talk about that in the context of his case. And in particular, if I'm correct, when Jeffrey went to trial, the medical examiner uncovered evidence that should have been used to point the case away from Jeffrey and toward someone else who actually committed the offense. So maybe Jeffrey could fill us in on these elements. And the other thing I want to say is I believe we have on Rodney Roberts. And Rodney Roberts' case is also very, very instructive and very, very horrible, because he was not only convicted of a sexual offense that he didn't commit, but after he served his time in prison, in New Jersey, they have a sexual predators law. And so after he served his time in prison, then they continue to confine him as a sexually violent predator. And it took years before he got released. I don't know if he's available and can talk, but Jeffrey, if you could talk about those other aspects of your case, I think it would be instructive.
Yeah, sure. Good questions. I'm glad you asked the questions. So the actual perpetrator left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim 3.5 years later, who was a school teacher and had 2 children. So in many ways, wrongful conviction is a public safety issue. Each time the actual wrong person is convicted, the actual perpetrator is free to strike again. And in terms of your second question, as mentioned, before, the DNA didn't match me, and instead of, the medical examiner insisting that, bottom line science be what holds the day, instead he allowed himself to be used as a pawn by the prosecutor, and so he gave false testimony. He falsely claimed that he had medical evidence that showed that the victim had been sexually active. During depositions in the lawsuit afterwards, when my lawyer went to his office with our expert, and he had his lawyer there, and he was supposed to show our experts, the slides where he claimed he found this medical evidence that he claimed indicated the victim had been sexually active. And so right then at that very last point, he finally admitted that what he claimed he saw on the slides didn't actually exist. And when he was asked in the deposition, further about that, he said that the day after the DNA didn't match me, he got a phone call from one of 3 people, and he claimed not to remember who, but he said he got a phone call from one of three people telling him that the DNA did not match me, and that he had to come up with some kind of a theory by which the case against me could continue and a conviction to be obtained. And he said that that was his motivation for doing the fabrication that he did.
Jeffrey, wasn't there another element in your case? I hope I'm not confusing with another case where they recovered a hair from the victim that I believe.
Okay, yeah. So there were hairs. Yes, there were hairs found on the victim's body, which were said to be from Negroid and Mongoloid origin. You can see the picture of me talking. I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm obviously not either of those ethnicities. Once again, rather than accepting the evidence or coming up with some kind of factual foundation to that make an argument, he resorted to arguing by inference again. So the prosecutor claimed that the hairs must have come from the medical examiner who was Vietnamese and his African American assistant. But he never got any of the hair testing actually done. And I later learned in the lawsuit, again during the discovery process, that when the hair expert learned that that was the way that the prosecutor was going to explain the hairs not matching me, that he told the prosecutor that he wanted him to get him the hair samples so that he could do the actual comparison, but that he was never given those samples. So yes, there was that additional element to.
Thank you, Jeff. Another question for you and Anthony. How do you cope with the lost years, and what makes you feel free?
I'll let Anthony answer first.
All right. I think you just got to make the best of what you got. We're only given a certain amount of time on this earth. And, while we suffered, it's no use to live in the past. Got to look for the future. And we have a lot of time left. We're still a little bit young. We could do great things, a lot of traveling, wrestling matches, good times. So, I mean, that's how we cope. There is a PTSD effect, but, and like Jeff and me, you kind of bypass it a little bit. And I guess that's pretty much it.
So in terms of me, I saw mental health professionals 4 times a week for 6 years. So doing therapy was a big part of that. I would say that each time that I've learned technology or I understand the culture a little bit more, I feel a little bit more tied into the world, and I feel less like a fish out of water. Socializing with other exonerees and even other formerly incarcerated people, I get a little bit more out of that than talking with just regular civilians. I feel like we speak a language that the other can understand. So that's part of it. I believe that my purpose in the world is to fight wrongful conviction, and that's how I make sense of everything. That's how I don't lose my mind even now. I embrace that, and I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I've lost so much. Why would I want to lose the rest of my life? So, I'm not angry or bitter. It's not like I'd be affecting anyone that had a hand in what happened to me if I was angry or bitter. And the vehicle which allows me to actualize that is I take that energy that I take that energy to feel that I feel, and I channel it into the work. I just like to make a quick point. Just I can't stress enough the importance of voting. Who's in office makes a big difference. As of 2 or 3 weeks ago, the number of exonerations through conviction review units within the DA's office is up to 440 nationally. So, getting the right people into the district attorney's office can make a tremendous difference if they have a real unit that does the right thing all day, every day on all the cases. That's another vehicle to try to facilitate getting people out. There are politicians that never met a criminal justice reform measure that they liked. So when we see that people are opposed to criminal justice reform, that means that we need to vote them out of office. We need to encourage people to vote. I can't emphasize enough the importance of people not trying to get out of jury service. It's important to serve on the jury and hold the prosecution to their burden of proof. Now, if they prove somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then you know how to vote. But if that's not the situation, then you're supposed to vote not guilty. And a lot of people get out of jury duty, and so the quality of juries that we wind up with is not really what it should be, and then that contributes a lot to wrongful convictions. Average length of wrongful convictions 14 years, and I feel like bad lawyering, contributes a lot to that. Lawyers they don't put alibi witnesses on, they don't put cases on, they don't introduce evidence, they're not aggressive enough, they're worried about their golfing buddy not getting offended with them, and there's too many institutional handicaps. It's not uncommon for one public defender to represent 100 people at the same time. Imagine as a college student carrying 10 classes, just as a lens to view it. There needs to be even playing field in terms of manpower and experts. And budget. There's a big disparity between the public defender's office and the district attorney's office. We need judges to be better. And by the time most people are exonerated, their appeals are exhausted. They've long since been exhausted. The courts emphasize, the finality of conviction, the idea that you have had your day in court, you lost, how long are we going to keep going through this? And on some level, that makes some sense. But whenever there's an objective reason to look at it again, it should be looked at again, because what good is a final conclusion if that final conclusion is not accurate? Similarly, the courts have this maddening obsession with proceduralism rather than substantive justice. And what I mean by that is, en route to losing 7 appeals, I once lost in federal court because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong information. So my petition arrived 4 days too late. And the court looked at that, and that's what carried the day. They never even reached my arguments that I was innocent in the DNA and that my Fifth Amendment rights had been violated. So in reality, what does it matter? I wouldn't care if I was 100 days late. What of it? Take that up with the lawyer. Don't dismiss my case. Get to the ground. Get to the merits of the grounds that I'm arguing, and either I'm right on the facts and the law, or I'm not. So, there's someone asked in the chat. Somebody asked a question as to a place to donate.
Yes, I was gonna just bring it up. Please.
I know of a pretty good organization that's freed 7 people and has passed some reforms and has 11 active cases and is doing a decent job at reforms in education. I think it was started by an exoneree that is actually talking tonight. I'll send a link through the chat.
You can also if you're ever buying anything from Amazon, you can use they have a Smile Amazon feature, which also allows for donations to the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation. I'm pretty much subscribed to that regularly. So, and it's very easy. Every time you buy something, Amazon donates a little bit. So you can do that, or you can donate directly. You can also use on Facebook. There are fundraisers you can do for the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation, for Innocence Project, for others like it. And Jeff, there was another question for you and everybody and all of the exonerees. In terms of, so the length of the time that you were incarcerated for a crime that you didn't commit is horrifying. How did you keep hope for so long? And were there times when you thought to give up?
Yeah, Good. Somebody's going to say something. Sammy, you want to
Yeah,
answer that
yeah,
again?
absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. So I would be happy to answer that only because I completely and totally dealt with that. So upon my conviction, I was pregnant with twins. And after my baby girl died, I was like, I cannot believe that this is my life. And so, I had to go through 2 trials and 2 appeals to finally be exonerated. But what I did is I tried to find as much purpose as I could in what I had to do. So if I mop the floors from 8 to 11 a.m. and 1 to 3:40 every single day, I was going to be the best mopper there. And the other thing is I prayed a prayer, and the prayer was, God, if you're going to keep me here, please use my talents and purpose to your will. And I prayed that prayer so hard 1 week before I was released. So I feel like God was like, you know what, I'm going to use you on the outside. But I think for a lot of people who are incarcerated, becoming involved with any of the programs, and for me, I was extremely involved in church, and that's how I kept it going. And I also looked forward to whenever the next visit was going to be, and that's how I kept hope alive, because I knew if I saw my family members that this was not my reality, prison was not my home, it's just where I temporarily resided.
I'll just quickly and just say just belief in God was one thing. Another thing was the law library and learning the law gave a sense of empowerment. I used to collect articles about other people who were rated, and that used to help me keep going as far as motivation. I found things to throw myself into, so I took some of the limited educational programs in prison that had some kind of potential use for the outside. So GED, college, before they took that, I learned to type, computers, other trades. I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books every week, and I listened to sports talk radio, but it wasn't sports talk radio. It was a lifeline to the outside. And, I engaged in this elaborate delusion when I was playing basketball or chess or ping pong. And I used to pretend like I was a professional player, and so was everyone else. And people waiting on the sidelines, waiting for next game, that was the audience. But it wasn't really like little kids just fantasizing playing professional sports. I mean, I was a defense mechanism. I needed to leave the prison for a couple of hours, and if I needed to delude myself, doing that, that's what I did. So I'm going to send a link in the chat. I did write an op-ed that Sports Illustrated published, when I talked about that and the general role of sports in prison.
Thank you. If anybody else has any questions, now's the time to either speak up or type up.
I want to know what Amanda Village's story is.
Oh, hi, Herman. I'm actually the wife of the exoneree Daniel Villegas that spoke earlier. I was with him when he was incarcerated, and then with him now. So we have 2 children together. He has a 26-year-old daughter who was 6 months old when he was convicted, when he was a teenager. And then I have an 11-year-old. But I advocate for wrongfully convicted. And Jeffrey also helped us in our state, in our city, locally, with getting the first female district attorney in our city elected. She was going up against actually the prosecutor who prosecuted my husband in this last trial. So Jeffrey helped us finance that, and I just advocate, I speak to anybody and everybody. And it kind of caught me off guard the other day. I was at work and one of my coworkers was saying, a lot of you people who say you're innocent, you guys they involve themselves in the streets, and they get themselves into these situations where they become wrongfully convicted. If they just abide by the law and stop messing around with criminals, then maybe they wouldn't get themselves in that position. And it made me think, like, is that what a lot of other people are thinking? Because I think of Jeffrey, I think of other exonerees, Marty Tinkliff, who have never had a criminal history, who live normal lives and still got themselves wrongfully convicted. So it's making me think now, like, do we have to try to teach people that it can't just happen? It doesn't just happen to the people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. It also happens to people who are just living a normal life. And it makes me frustrated because people think it could never happen to me. And I just keep trying to speak out and make them aware that it can happen to anybody. It's like a witch hunt to anybody. And hi, Anthony. Yeah, so I'm just an advocate.
I just wanted to jump in and comment on that a little bit. In psychology, we call this the just world illusion. Basically, that is why part of the reason why juries convict people despite substantial reason to see that a confession was actually false, but people still convict, and because they feel like, well, bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. If this person is on the stand, if they're on trial, it must be because they are guilty of something. Even if it's not this, there must be something bad that they've done. And so somehow they are deserving. So it's actually quite internalized. And a lot of people have that. And we have to consciously understand that circumstances a lot of time put people in those situations, and they have through no fault of their own. Absolutely. And so, yeah, we have to explain that to people. We have to educate and advocate for people to understand that. Yeah.
Matt, I want to address two things. Matt, one of the things you're going to have to get in the habit of doing, if you're not in the habit of doing it yet, and the exonerees and everybody that's on this panel, you got to pull what I call the whole card of the ignorant. And how you do that is you start by pointing out the fact that, hey, you have over 4,000 exonerees in this nation. Everybody couldn't be bad people. And then you got individuals such as police officers who have been wrongfully convicted. You have sons and daughters of police officers who have been wrongfully convicted. There's a few politicians whose sons then slipped through the crack and what have you. And so you got to educate them along them lines. But then you also for what they are. I would hate to have a person like that, because I would have got convicted just on that amount. But he must be fresh. I was fresh up out of high school. I gave my parents no problems, and then that happened. And then they drugged my father. My mother told my father, "You go get him," because you know he didn't do that. He came back with a report that said, "Hey, they can put him at the scene, and they got evidence. Yeah, you can put me at the scene of the crime if you fabricated it." And they didn't come out until years later after I had been exonerated. Here's the second thing I want to say. The question was, was there light at the end of the tunnel and what have you? For me, I was a madman the first 3 years of my incarceration. I blanked out. I can't tell you what happened, when it happened. All I know is I wound up in the SHU program, doing a 16-month SHU program, because I had taken batteries and put them in a sock, and I started hitting the door because they hadn't fed me. The door had a long glass in the door. Now, I got to escape. And in the SHU program, I went. And while I was there, I met this guy named Michael Phillips. He had been in the indeterminate SHU program. This guy had been in the hole for 8 years already. And I told him what I was in for, because he felt like I was just too hostile and bitter. And he was like, and when I told him what it was, he made a lot of sense to me. He said, "Look, man, well, you have a choice. You can stay back here with me, or you can get out and go on that main line, get in them law libraries and find out how in the hell they did what they did to you and get the hell up out of here." It sounded like a plan to me. And then when I came to the main line, the Lord put somebody in my path. He came in on a violation, gave me the information to the Innocent Project. And here it is. I'm right here, telling you about my experience and the things that I'm doing and what I plan on doing. So for me, walking off that time, it was that moment where I saw the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know what bothers me too, Jeffrey, is when somebody who's charged, I don't like the fact that they have to go into court wearing a jumpsuit. Like a jury looks at that and automatically they're thinking, oh yeah, this guy's, look at him, he looks guilty. I mean, isn't there a law or something that can help where they can at least go in a suit? Because jury goes by their first look, the first look of a somebody who's charged, and they come in a jumpsuit. That's not a good look.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that appearance is important in providing people with clothes to be presentable when going to trial. I don't think that's ever really been discussed, but I do think it's important for the reason that you mentioned. At the same time, I mean, I had on a suit, and many other people had suits on, and that really didn't. I can see how it could make it worse, but it's we lost despite that as well.
Mm-hmm.
As we wrap up, and we've got like about a minute left, I just want to do a quick shameless promotion. So on October 9th, if you liked what you heard tonight, on October 9th, it could happen to you, California. We're having a summit, pathways to accountability. We're gonna have 5 panel discussions. We're going to be talking about the role of the media. We're going to be talking about the death penalty. We're going to be talking about prosecutorial misconduct. It's really for people in California. However, everybody is welcome to join it as well. It's part of It Could Happen to You, California's initiative of building coalition. What we do in New York, what we do in Pennsylvania, we do in California is a simple roadmap. We build statewide coalitions. We gather together the exonerees, people falsely accused but acquitted, all types of criminal justice reform organizations, individual advocates, family members who have family members who allege they're wrongfully imprisoned. Everyday citizens. We take on non-traditional partners. We have labor and teacher union and steam fitters and hotel people in the hotel and hospitality. We form coalitions, and we then push 1 or 2 issues aimed at wrongful conviction prevention and false accusation prevention. And it's harder for them to ignore us. We come into office and we have. I remember in New York when we outmaneuvered. We outmaneuvered the District Attorneys Association, and by the time it was all said and done, a letter to the governor was sent with 125 organizations signed on. After we had walked the halls of Albany for about 8 years. So, we do put coalition together, and lots of roles for everybody, and everyone can participate. To the extent that they can, and we got it done. It was harder for them to ignore us, and we're going to be having that event on October 9th. Again, it'll 9 o'clock in California time, be from 9 to 3, and it'll be from 12 to 6 New York time. So I hope to see people on there, even if you're not from California. We're always looking to work with people. Our tent is very big. Everybody has a role. You can participate to the extent that you have the bandwidth or what your expertise is. Some of the other my Californian colleagues, Kat Dean, Pape, can send one of the flyers through the chat. But I'd like to see everybody there. We're going to be doing a similar event in Pennsylvania to grow our coalition there, and we're still moving in New York as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, so much. And thank you to all of you. And I know that many people, most of you, a lot of people who are gathered here today are familiar with the issue of wrongful convictions a little bit too well on a very personal level, either having been through this nightmare or who have a family member or a friend fighting for their freedom. And but we also have many students here, which I'm very happy to see, and we have faculty members and members of the general public. And so I'd like to thank you for being here. And I will tell you something that what I want to end with really is something that I say to my students in classes over and over again. It's on every one of us to contribute to the cause. So those of you who are students in the criminal justice programs and going into careers in law enforcement, your contribution can come in the form of going that extra mile and avoiding the pitfalls of tunnel vision in your investigations and doing your job well. And it can come by taking a client or two pro bono for those of you who are going to be future lawyers. Or as a community member, doing your due diligence and during jury duty, as Jeff mentioned already. And it can be just as simple as spreading the word and talking to your family and friends about what you've heard today, and spreading awareness and signing the petitions and demanding justice and demanding reform from the politicians who can actually make that happen, because justice is an action, and at the expense of sounding a little bit like Yoda, act we must. And
yeah, this podcast, G got a documentary making, so there's that. There's writing blogs. There's research. There's definitely a role for researchers. Dr. Johnson, does that. Marina, you do that as well. And without those research studies, there are no statistics, there are no scholarly papers to cite when talking about wrongful conviction and meeting with the elected officials, and even supplementing legal findings with secondary persuasive things. So definitely a role for that. Within the nonprofit context, many different disciplines and walks of life have a home in those type of organizations, whether we're talking about writing grants or fundraising or doing policy work or doing in-house publications, website, blogs. Really only limited by what our imagination is. If you're interested in helping exonerees reintegrate, there's certainly a role for psychologists and social workers. So there's many different ways you can make careers out of it. You can just do it on the side. Certainly doing investigative work is part of it, but we're only really limited by our imagination and how much time and effort. When it comes to a wrongful conviction, there's many parts of the system that come together, from multiple officers to prosecutors to judges to lawyers not doing their job. A lot of factors, a lot of people include, some intentionally, others just being a cog that really doesn't care, work too much. So in the same way, the fight against wrongful conviction has to be a total team effort with everybody firing on all cylinders. To the extent, just play your role and get involved is what I'm saying. And so to that extent, I hope that everybody here will learn more about wrongful conviction and do something, anything, do something and get involved to the extent that you can.
And on that note, thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Good night to you.
Good night.
Everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, y'all.